Morning everyone, and welcome to Monday's Thought for the Day. Well, I'm sure that you've seen the news over the past week about the absolutely terrible situation in India, where the rate of COVID infections and deaths are rising at a very disturbing rate. The lack of access to oxygen and the COVID vaccine are major contributory factors. And the sad irony is that the majority of the vaccines used around the world are manufactured in India. It's likely that you or me have had a vaccine made there. There's a Christian charity called South Asian Concern, which is based in the UK, and its chair is someone called Ram Gidumal. He's of Indian origin, and he describes the situation as complete meltdown. He talked about a situation where one ambulance took a patient to 4 hospitals, only to be turned away. But 4 hours later, the patient died. And that sort of scene is being repeated throughout India, and often death comes simply because of a lack of oxygen supplies. I watched a news program where a man was desperately driving around for miles and miles to access oxygen for his desperately ill father, and he would find one. He'd have to pay way over the odds for it, and then he'd come back, put the cylinder down, and there would be enough for about 1 hour, and he would go off again to see whether he could find more oxygen. Now, he had money to be able to do that. So what chance do the poor have there? Over 10,000 people a day are dying. So what's this got to do with us? Well, firstly, they're our neighbours, and they're in need. The pandemic has shown, perhaps more than ever, how interdependent we are. Secondly, we live in a country that's one of the wealthiest in the world, and one that's secured more than its fair share of the vaccination. And that's along with other developed Western states. Thankfully, we've had Boris Johnson saying this week that the UK will offer help and support, and I know that that's going. And also President Joe Biden has said that he'll be sending a surplus of supplies to India. In a sense, whilst that's a positive thing, it doesn't solve anything. Because pandemics, I suppose, like all natural disasters, reveal the vulnerability and the inequity and the injustice that exists in the world. And the current pandemic's no exception. If we look at the difference in vaccine availability between the West and the majority world, just 13% of the wealthiest countries control more than half the world's supply of vaccine. And at the same time, the poorest countries may not even be able to roll out a vaccine to their citizens until 2022 or even 2023. And as of last month, countries such as Zimbabwe, Tunisia, Malawi have vaccinated less than 2% of their populations. And our friends in Nigeria are nowhere near getting the vaccine. Similarly, in South America, while some countries have made progress, there are others such as Peru and Guatemala and Honduras and Venezuela. They've only vaccinated, less than 2% of their population. And we don't exist in isolation. We can't view this pandemic in isolation. We're doing well, aren't we, with our vaccination programs? But here, and I'm grateful for that, but we remain at risk if others in our world are not also protected. And that's the reality of being our neighbours. Because that inequality is both an injustice and a threat. Dr. Anthony Fauci, remember, he was always having to front President Trump's response to the COVID pandemic. He said recently, successful vaccine rollouts in the US and other wealthy nations have made people hopeful that the end of the COVID-19 pandemic is in sight. But the majority of the world's population doesn't yet have access to these vaccines. And without a strong global effort to immunise everyone, new variants could tighten the pandemic's grip on rich and poor countries alike. And the head of the World Health Organization has said that this inequality of the vaccine distribution could result in a catastrophic moral failure. He says no life should be lost because of the unfair distribution of vaccines. No one should be left behind because they or their country can't afford the vaccine. The most vulnerable people are in the countries with broken health systems. For Christians, that inequity in vaccine availability is a call for us to confront injustice. And there are some examples around the world. There's a program to enable trying to bring equity to vaccine access. It's a program that started in Canada, and it's called Love My Neighbour. And it's made a lot of progress in supporting vaccine access for the poorest of the poorest countries of the world. And variations of the program exist in several countries, and it calls for people, this is a simple thing, who receive the vaccine to donate money equal to the value of the vaccine they received. And all of those funds go to UNICEF for this program called COVAX, which is to buy vaccine for the majority world. And without such a thing as COVAX, it's likely that Western countries will continue to prioritise their own citizens, and the majority world will go years without achieving full vaccination. And as I've already said, that also has implications for us. And as Christians, we need to be seeking God's will for our responses in this situation. And I believe this pandemic is an opportunity to recognise and to love our neighbour, to do what Jesus asked us to do, to recognise our global neighbour, our neighbour in the global community, to recognise our interdependence and need for each other, a call to love our neighbour, and a call to cease our exploitation and create a world that focuses on need rather than the power of the dollar. I think Bob Dylan said once, money doesn't talk, it screams. It's a call for change, and we need to heed it, not just for others' sake, but for our own. Amen. Take care. God bless.